I'd like to start this by saying Project Warlock 2 was still in early access when I made the first part of these videos. I didn't realize that, and to be honest, these aren't very serious videos to begin with, but it's exiting early access on May 28th, which is tomorrow. So that's worth considering. These are just my thoughts as I played the game in its current state. I may or may not revisit this in the last episode at some other time, but I'm not really sure how much would have changed anyways. Keep that in mind, I suppose. Episode 2 of Project Warlock 2 starts a bit more cinematic than the first one. The first one had its set piece of the castle being attacked, but there's something special about a giant wall of fire that you have to run away from. It surprised me, that's for sure. We play as a cute teenage girl named Erd, who's actually older than she looks, because of course she is. That's how this kind of thing works. I'll be referring to the previous episode with the guy, Palmer, throughout the video. When I say episode, I mean the content in the last video. When I say mission, I mean this video. In episode 1, you picked up treasures for an EXP bonus for whatever the leveling system does. I really appreciate how they changed how they look for this episode's treasures, especially because I think they look pretty damn cool. Unfortunately, the game still hangs when it saves, which I noticed before even fighting anyone, and since the first area is above a pit of lava, I kinda almost fell off when that happened. Anyways, the first weapon we get is a kunai. It kinda flies lazily through the air. I was expecting a bit more oomph since we're using magic to throw it, but it's still a cool effect. As I kept playing, I'd realized that this throw speed is just fine, and is actually pretty good for how it's used. Episode 1, we played as, I'm assuming, a warlock. This time we play as a witch, who's apparently been banished for being too dangerous or something like that. The kunai is our melee weapon, which is interesting since it's ranged and has infinite ammo. And it does quite a lot of damage. You can take on pretty tough enemies with just this if you want to save on ammo, and I kinda like that. In fact, initially it may seem like it's a bit too well suited for that. In fact, it may seem like the kunai might be a little too strong in general. You can just spam down hallways, and as long as you're not standing completely still, you can just hold left click and everything will be dead pretty quickly. Or, that's what I thought at first. The reality is, the kunai kicks ass. You can throw it and swap to something else, shooting another schmuck in the face as the kunai you already threw collides with the unlucky bastard you were aiming at before. It works incredibly well. So well in fact that I think you're kind of at a detriment if you upgrade it. The kit of the character in this episode feels a lot more well-rounded, except for the dynamite and crossbow, but I'll get to that later on. Unfortunately, like I alluded to, both upgrades for the kunai turn it back into a melee weapon, which really sucks, honestly. You can either get a tomahawk or a spear, and it seems to add lifesteal to either one. And to be fair, the spear still has a ton of range for a melee weapon. Still, the fantasy of levitating a knife and throwing it with magic is way too cool to get rid of, so I just never upgraded it. Thankfully, I wasn't really punished for that. If anything, I felt like it was a better idea not to upgrade it, but maybe I'm wrong. Either way, upgrading the kunai feels more like a choice rather than something you have to do, and I really appreciate that. Speaking of the fantasy of being a combat witch, reload animations using magic to reload them is so damn cool. The base SMG does it, the shotgun revolver upgrade does it, I'm sure others do it, and I really wouldn't mind if all the weapons had some wacky telekinesis type reload animation, but I'm sure some restraint was good as well. The second weapon we get is a revolver, and the sound design is pretty great yet again. They really nailed the sound of the weapons. A good sounding weapon goes a long way to making it feel good to use. It reminds me of that one story from Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, where they had some issue with perceived game balance, and they fixed it by changing the sound of it. I'm sure there are a few videos covering it if you haven't heard of it before, but I'll leave a link in the description to a video by People Make Games, even if he does mention Quidditch. I'm also noticing something interesting. I'm not sure what's causing it, but sometimes it seems like my bullets just weren't being used. I'm not sure if it's on a headshot or a headshot kill or just a kill, but I haven't really been told anything about it. Later on, you can upgrade the revolver into a magnum pistol, and the description of that one says hitting a headshot does not use a bullet from the magazine, so maybe that's what was happening? The other upgrade turns it into a shotgun, which may sound odd since we actually already have a pump-action shotgun, but you can turn that one into a shorty pump-action or a repeater rifle, which is pretty awesome. I opted for the rifle, making the revolver a shotgun, swapping the roles of the pistol and the shotgun, and that seemed to be a really good idea. The repeater rifle kicks ass, dealing a load of damage and even piercing through enemies. And the shotgun revolver upgrade kicks ass too. does a lot of damage, fires faster, and has what I'm assuming is a speed loader instead of being fed a single shell at a time. It's perfect for tearing shit up when I'm up close, or even somewhat at a range. The spread is wide, but that just means I have to aim less. Seriously, I cleared rooms with a couple of shots from this thing, it's wild. However, back to the repeater rifle for a moment, there is a very unintended feature. The mechanic that reloads your weapon when you switch to another weapon seems to be broken on the pump shotgun, and I'm assuming it's 2 upgrades, where it will instead reload them instantly. So instead of waiting for the reload animation to finish, you can just switch to another weapon and back, and your gun is full again. You can actually swap weapons back and forth to skip the animation of chambering another round. Kinda like quick swapping in Counter-Strike Source, to unscope the scout or op and skip the bolting animation. Though I'm still not sure if that ever did anything. Where this really becomes a problem is with the alt-fire unlock for the repeater rifle. You can load multiple bullets to fire a charged up bullet, and when you shoot and switch quickly enough, you will keep the charge of all of those bullets, letting you deal ridiculous amounts of damage per shot extremely quickly. This does use up a lot of ammo, as it's effectively firing multiple bullets at once, but if you're trying to tear through a group of elite Wendigos, I'm not sure if there's something that can do it faster. It is really fun, but it should probably be fixed. The minimap is still bad. It seems to glitch out when there's parts of the level that overlap with each other, but the episode seems to favor a much flatter level design in general, and it actually works a bit better that way. I still think it should be a top-down map, absolutely, or at least giving us a way to rotate the view. But if nothing else, it can show me where I have and haven't been. Sometimes. But beyond that, it's still not very useful in my opinion. The enemies this time around are much more dynamic. The Red Elf Hunters fire pretty fast projectiles in bursts, and they can also do evasive rolls. They also have a sniper shot that is indicated by a red aiming laser if you're far enough away. There's some enemies called Vampies, which seem to be slightly resistant to bullets, but died in one hit to the kunai, giving me a reason to use more of my kit, which I very much appreciate. They are a little annoying since they're melee units with a ranged attack, but as I got better at taking care of them, they became less of a problem. As I continued through the first level, I ran into another one of those kill all enemies to progress areas. As I tried to back up, I ran directly into a couple of enemies that spawned directly behind me, along with that same glowing wall preventing me from leaving. This game seems to really love spawning enemies behind you. I went through an off path just earlier in this level, and I think they'd spawned a couple enemies behind me, a bit further back so they didn't attack me right away. It's sneaky, and I really don't know if I'm okay with it, to be honest. On the one hand, they want to push you to be more mobile and aggressive, and I guess I get that, but on the other hand, when I'm just trying to take cover and scout out the room ahead of me, getting hit in the back just feels cheap and not much else. I still think there should be some sort of warning for when these events happen. The first arena is cool though, and the music seemed neat too. Now that I think of it, I think the music is supposed to be the indicator for the kill everything to progress events, but the music is way too quiet for these sections. These areas are supposed to be a contrast, a climax, the peak of excitement, so why is the music quieter than the normal levels track? Probably why I keep getting caught off guard. It doesn't feel special like it's supposed to. In one of the next areas, we get a magical ability called Poison Spell. I tried using it in the fight that happens right after, but I ended up dying because my character didn't seem to do anything. I was kinda caught off guard, the room's pretty small, and as it turns out, the ability doesn't do anything until you click. I wasn't really sure what to expect since the game didn't tell me anything about it, and didn't give me a chance to try it out on my own before throwing a bunch of enemies at me. Now, sure, this is the second episode of the game, but I don't think that's an excuse for bad pacing of game mechanics. Though, just because it's honestly a bit cheap doesn't mean it ruins the game or anything. Anyways, they may as well call this spell the Geneva Suggestion, because you'll be gassing the shit out of those demons once you get it upgraded. Can I say that on YouTube? I guess I'm gonna find out. The next spell we get is called Agility, and it does what you might expect. It makes you move much faster. There's an upgrade for it that makes you invincible when using melee weapons as well, which is very interesting. It kinda reminds me of the Berserk power-up from the original Doom. Funnily enough, the other option is just to double its duration, and I opted for that one, since my melee option was basically range 1 anyways, and I was switching between my weapons too much for it to matter. This one seems to act as the dual wield ability in episode 1, where if you cancel it early, you'll get less of a cooldown. Maybe that's just how all the Q abilities work? Maybe it's something shared in the code or something like that, or maybe it's on purpose, I don't know. Unlike the dual wield ability from episode 1, the poison spell goes on a full cooldown when you change weapons, which is kind of a shame. but in my opinion it's much more usable than the fire and ice spells Palmer had access to. Another thing I've noticed is that the rings around the explosive projectiles are still dark circles, but since the floor is much more colorful and brighter, I can actually see the circles and position myself accordingly, which is a much needed change from episode 1. I think they should either have a different indicator for episode 1, or maybe have it be a better contrast in color or combination of colors, maybe some sort of filter that changes how it looks depending on what color it's on so it's always visible, that kind of thing. Finishing the first level brings us to Urd's Sanctuary, which I'm pleased to see is a different design than the first episode. Not a fan of the flashing lightning, but the moody raining and the fact that it's outdoors immediately sets it apart both visually and tonally from the first episode. The layout is generally the same, which is nice, so you don't have to spend any time adjusting to a new position of the leveling up stations and such. There wouldn't be much reason to change where they'd be, so I'm glad that they didn't. I feel like this is one of those things that you don't really notice until there's something wrong, but I appreciate it. The music in her sanctuary is pretty cool too, very atmospheric and kinda tribal, I think. I like it. The next mission has some whack Charlie Brown-ass music. It's not bad, but I don't really care for it. I'm sorry, I know they probably worked very hard on it, but it just feels out of place in my opinion. Especially considering how the music gets better later on. In Mission 4, for example, the music is more atmospheric, and I feel like, at least in this episode, that's the vibe where this soundtrack really shines. It also introduces poison barrels, and this is where I find out that our character seems to be immune to poison. Where our elements in episode 1 were fire and ice, our elements this time are crystal and poison, so it makes some sense. Another introduction is goddamn demon cowboys? Okay, PW2. I was unaware of your game. I love these guys. I understand the inclusion of the revolver weapon now. It'd be super unnecessary, but part of me was hoping there was some mechanic where if you switched to the revolver and shot them fast enough, it'd be an insta-kill, like a quick draw. Ah well, save it for Project Warlock 3, I guess. The next weapon we get in the second level is dynamite. Like from Blood. The aiming reticle shows where exactly the dynamite will go. It takes the guesswork out of the throw, and I like that a lot. The fuse timer on it seems pretty long though, even if it does explode on contact with an enemy, but you can't shoot it when it's on the ground or out of the air, which I feel like was a missed opportunity. It could have even made the explosion bigger, like how it works in Ultra Kill. And right after writing that, I realized that you can upgrade the dynamite into a TNT charge, which actually has no fuse and must be shot to explode for a, quote, huge explosion, as the game says. They thought of everything. Unfortunately, due to that long fuse timer, and the fact that for some reason it doesn't even bounce off of walls, I struggled to find a use for this weapon without an upgrade. If I try and use it on groups of enemies that rush me down, if I aim for them, it'll just kill me. If I aim for the ground, it's not going to go off for another 4 seconds or so. The other weapons, like the revolver shotgun, sort of make this one obsolete, and I struggle to find opportunities to use it besides spamming it into a room and shooting anyone who comes out. I suppose that's a strategy, but it reminds me how in episode 1 I was only really using the assault rifle and shotgun. The only thing that the dynamite really does for me is sending me back to my last saved game. And there's a button for that. So I try to use it as little as possible, unfortunately. If you do upgrade it to the TNT, the alt fire unlock for the upgrade will let you blow up all TNT that you threw with a right click. This is honestly essential if you don't want to kill yourself trying to find a use for the weapon. And even then, the alt fire has a huge delay of something like half a second, but it should be instant. It's such a clunky weapon to use through and through, and that's a shame because it didn't have to be. In Mission 3 there's an SMG, but it's a secret weapon. Getting it here is getting it early, as it shows up in the next mission. And I kinda like that. Choosing when and where to give the player their weapons in a boomer shooter is an important choice. In Calcium Contract, yes, I'm bringing that game up again, it's good, go play it, you actually start with only the pistol of that game in every level. That's a really cool idea based on a pistol start type of play, and it makes you not worry about using ammunition as much, since you can't take it with you. The SMG in PW2 seems best suited for the quick melee hards that rush you down, since using the dynamite will just get you killed, and the revolver and shotgun may not fire fast enough. It's also good if you really want to fill a room or a target full of bullets and don't really care about the specifics. Upgrades for this one turn it into a slow-firing, crank-operated Gatling gun, or let you dual-wield 2 of them for faster fire rate. I went with the dualies to take care of groups quicker and as a possible panic button. The unlockable alt-fire empties a free magazine with no recoil and full accuracy with a long cooldown, which can really help delete some problematic enemies. As I go through episode 2 of Project Warlock 2, the levels feel a hell of a lot more inspired than the first one. This is by no means me saying that the levels in episode 1 are bad. They were quite good, honestly. But these feel so interesting and dynamic to go through. It's quite different from episode 1. Levels have you travel much further distances, like you're actually moving through a world. And as you go through this episode, the levels have distinct styles that are hugely different from one another. In episode 1, lots of the levels sort of flow back into itself, making them feel much more layered, which can be good, but it kind of feels like they're reusing environments a little too. In episode 2, you're always moving and going somewhere. Like, you're not finding out how to unlock 3 doors to get to the exit button, you're finding and making a path to continue your journey. It's almost like comparing a Doom level to a Half-Life one. It feels more video gamey in a sense, and it has that something that I felt was lacking in episode 1. And it still feels like a world that's lived in by the demons or people or whatever that live or used to live here, which is a great balance. The last part of Mission 4 has you go across a vast area. A big enough area that you can't see the wall if there is one on the other side. When I saw this area, I knew something big was coming. Maybe there was a boss fight, or maybe I'd fight a huge horde of enemies like in Serious Sam or something like that. So I pushed forward, keeping my eyes peeled, and then the level ended. I was a little disappointed, to be honest. The next level starts with a little of what I was expecting, but then it was the same type of level design, though there was this really cool view of the area that I'd be later in the level. The music in Mission 5 continues to be atmospheric and moody, with a blues song, and it's perfect. I don't know what happened in Mission 2, but in this mission, I'm a cowboy witch, betrayed and banished to some hellish plane, finding my way back to get my revenge. Or something like that. Yeehaw. That is, until I'm placed in the I'm not trapped in here with you, you're trapped in here with me room, and the, I think, generic and quiet metal song starts playing. It's kind of a shame, really. They could have made a more action-y blues or tribal song for these bits. Think like how Payday 2's heist for Reservoir Dogs did their music. It was still action-y and hype, but still in the same style as they were doing, not changing to dubstep for the assault waves, for example.
Hang in there. Show those joints.
But as we get closer and closer to our end goal, I think the music starts to reflect that, getting closer to what the soundtrack was in the first episode. I think it's thematic, but I'm not really sure. Something they are doing better in this episode, however, are the silhouettes for enemies. Maybe it's because I'm settling into their design or something, but I'm having a much easier time differentiating between the different types of enemies. I think their colors and animations help set them apart in a much more immediate way than the enemies from episode 1 did, and that's great to see them make very real improvements on things like this, at least in my eyes. Well, mostly improvements. There are 2 enemies in particular, the Wendigo and the Vertigo. Besides a fun play on words, they both look nearly identical, but one will shoot at you, and the other is an archvile without the ability to revive enemies, I think. This is less of an issue as you want to take cover from both, but still. I do understand that the Wendigo has 2 legs and the Vertigo has 4, but when they're both facing you, which they most likely will be, you won't be able to tell immediately if you're looking at a centaur or not. In Mission 5 we get our last ability, the Crystal Spell, and boy oh boy. I just want to say, the idea of someone gunning down demons and then putting their gun away for a book? Like, you know something fucking awesome's gonna happen. It's like when a monk puts his staff down and starts throwing hands. You know shit just got serious. This spell is pretty slick. I already prefer Crystal to Poison because, as far as I can tell, Poison is just damage over time, while Crystal can cause enemies to explode on death or to fire additional projectiles, so yeah, I'm going with Crystal. The spell seems to basically just be a super powerful shotgun, at least without any upgrades. You know, I really do appreciate how we have these powerful abilities on a cooldown. Because they have a long cooldown, you want to be sure of when you use it, but when you do, you don't completely lose it until you find another charge of it, like the BFG from Doom 2016 for example. It's both worth consideration, as well as being free to just whip it out whenever you feel like it. And that goes a long way in making me feel like a badass when I use it, instead of wondering if it was okay that I just did. The upgrades for the Crystal Spell aren't anything crazy, just adding explosions or making them pierce enemies. These are fine, but I was kind of expecting one of them to turn it into a laser or something. Oh well. I ended up getting the exploding one, and I didn't regret it at all. I still dislike how the spell and weapon upgrades use the same points, but in this episode I unlocked basically everything I wanted to with the arsenal points, so it was much less of an issue here for me. I'd also like to point out there's this funny bug where you can cast both your poison and crystal spells at the same time, if you do it after casting haste. Your right hand overlaps with itself, and you can fire both projectiles at once. It's really goofy, but it's really effective. This is clearly unintended, and it may be an oversight because haste allows you to cast another spell while it's active, but it lets you cast both of the other spells while it's active. It also trivializes any large hordes, as you can wipe them out incredibly fast, and then pick up the cooldown orbs they drop to get your abilities back basically right away. Another thing I'm feeling less of is being punished for not scouring every square into the level looking for secrets. It feels like the upgrade points are more fairly distributed even if you don't go secret hunting. Either that or the secrets are much more naturally signposted, at least for some dumb gamer brain like me. On a side note, the end of Mission 5 has you get on one of those, cable cars? I've only ever seen them in video games. I don't think they're real. No, but seriously, it's a cool way to end the level, and it shows that they're thinking outside of the box for this episode, instead of just having it always end with a giant sign that says exit or something like that. Which is fine too, but I much prefer when it's much more creative while still being obvious that it's the exit. To be clear, they do still end some missions with a big exit button. One was placed on the back of a train that you board, but when they do, at least it makes sense as to what our character's doing there. And in the times where there was no exit button, I kind of felt like that's where the level was ending anyways, except at the end of Mission 4, but I'd still consider that a win. Another interesting thing they've done is the way they've implemented the human NPC type. In episode 1, they were just kind of placed around for lore or setting reasons, and if you killed them or they died, they would spawn an enemy for you to kill. In Mission 6, you open up to what looks like a bar. There's a bunch of humans running around with a couple of gunslingers. It felt like one of those light gun games where the civilians jump out at you and say, "Don't shoot," right before you shoot them and lose a life. Yeah, I'm still bitter about whoever thought that was a good idea. Anyways, it was actually pretty fun being careful with my shots, using the repeater rifle to take down the gunslingers while leaving the humans alive. They feel like they were placed here for a mechanical reason instead of with seemingly little thought put into it. It's not just that they're in places that make sense, but also places that make sense for them being in a video game, which is usually more important. Mission 7 is fucking awesome. You know that Unreal Tournament 2004 level on the trains?
To gain access to the repair vessel.
No? Anyways, it's like that. Unfortunately, there's no sound effects to really sell the effect of being on a train. No wind sounds, no train track sounds, not even a slight drizzle from the light rain. It's just totally silent. I understand what the game's trying to be, but it feels like such a shame to go so far for the level visually, but then stop short when it comes to the audio or even any other effects that they could have added. I know it probably would have taken a lot of time, but I don't know. I think it would have been worth it. Either way, this shit is great. Music continues being the slow-tempo, moody songs that make this episode stand out from the first one, which is fantastic. The boss fight here is probably a reference to the first boss of Quake, having to run around and press switches as a lava creature in the middle of shooting at you. Except in this game, pressing the switch freezes the boss and allows you to damage it. It's a very cute nod and a nice subversion of expectations. Anyways, maybe I'm biased because it's a train level, but E2M7 is a banger. Great job. I picked up the crossbow in, I think it was Mission 6, but I don't think I really used it that much. I'm really not sure what it does. It doesn't seem very useful, but maybe I'm just missing something, which is still a problem. It feels like they just needed a weapon that used mana as an ammo source, which I think this one does, and they couldn't really figure out a weapon class to fit with the rest of Erd's kit, so they just went with a crossbow. I don't know, even after the TNT upgrade, I even found myself using dynamite more, but the crossbow just feels like it's in this weird place where I don't know how the developers wanted me to use it. Mission 10 is my favorite music so far. It's very tribal and percussive, lots of drums, and it's got a very driving rhythm. It's great. It makes me wonder what the hell happened with the couple of tracks that aren't either cowboy blues or tribal flavored like this and some others. Maybe they ran out of time or money. I don't know. Episode 2 ends with a boss fight and a bit of text, likely meant as a teaser and a lead up to episode 3, which is the hot demon babe. Hell yeah. All in all, episode 2 mostly improves upon what episode 1 is trying to do, with a couple of missteps here, some bugs there, but I never felt like the episode was dragging out. The levels were really varied, and there was an interesting pace. I could tell, generally, what was going on just by paying attention to where I ended up in the next level from the last, which is perfect for this kind of game. From what I remember, I enjoyed Project Warlock 1, and it's really cool to see it go on in the sequel to do its own things and be interesting in its own way. It's almost like there are still good games out there or something. Nah, too soon to say. I'm definitely curious to see how they change things up for the third episode, though. Anyway, that's it for now. I'll see you later.